introduce our guest?
I would absolutely love to. So, this week's guest is Janice Selbie, who was raised in a Pentecostal home and married a man with his sights set on ministry. While living on a conservative Bible college campus, she began homeschooling their daughter and became, daughters, and became involved with Holdman Mennonites. In short time, she rejected worldly vestiges like TV and jewelry, and she began wearing a head covering. This is going to be a great talk. Um, Her efforts at holiness shrunk her world until reality broke through and destroyed her religious fantasies. Janice divorced her husband and her religion and went on to school to become a registered professional counselor. As she learned about her own trauma, she noted that it is closely resembled on how others spoke about leaving cults. Learning about religious trauma syndrome was pivotal for Janice, and she devoted her practice to helping others recover from RTS. As an RPC and religious trauma recovery coach, Janice founded the Conference on Religious Trauma and the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference, started the Divorcing Religion podcast, participated in the Leaving Jesus documentary, and recently published her Amazon bestseller, Divorcing Religion, a Memoir and Survival Handbook. Everyone, please welcome back for the eighth appearance, Janice Selbie.
Yay, Janice. Thank you for joining us.
8 times. That's crazy.
I
Hi,
know.
everyone. It's nice to be here again.
Well, we are so excited to have you back. You are always one of my favorite guests to have on because your story is amazing and you are amazing. And I always love to hear what you're getting up to because you're always doing some new and exciting thing next. And I know you have a new and exciting thing coming up soon, if I am not mistaken. Would you like to tell us about that?
Sure, yes. So I think you're talking about the Shameless Sexuality Conference,
I
Shameless
am.
Sexuality, Life After Purity Culture. And this is the second time that I am holding this event. It was actually going to be in Seattle this time. I was so looking forward to it because I'm in Canada, in British Columbia. And I thought, finally, I'm going to get to meet a bunch of my peeps in person. And then the government got all crazy, and Canadians are getting detained at the border. And it just was a little too iffy for me. I didn't want to subject my conference staff to any of that stuff. And of course, also concerns for my speakers and attendees, some of whom are trans and non binary folk. And I didn't want them being put in a situation where they could be potential targets of harassment. So, after a lot of deliberation, I decided to switch it to the online format. But it actually works out great because it means more people can attend. And I got to slash the ticket prices because it was going to be like $250 in person. And now it's like $99 and $50 if you just want the recording. So I think it's way more accessible for people. So I hope that works out for everyone here.
Well, I, for one, am excited at the opportunity to maybe be able to attend now. So I have just dropped that link in the chat and I can't wait. I know we have a lot of people who are interested in this topic. This is, if I am not mistaken, our second most common topic that people call our helpline about. People call about fear of hell, people
Yeah.
call about broken relationships and relationship problems as a result of coming out of religion, and people call about sexuality and especially shame and guilt around it. So this is one of our
Definitely.
top issues that really impacts people when they're coming out of religion. And I know you have told us your story before, but if we are always here to hear more about your story, if you would like to tell us again. But why do you think it is that this is such an issue that we have to address, that so many people struggle with when they're coming out of religion?
Right. I think it has a lot to do with identity. So when we divorce religion, we typically lose our community, our worldview, and our identity. If how we identified was according to our ideology, I mean, who was I when I wasn't a Christian anymore? And then I wasn't a homeschooler, a homeschool mother anymore, and then I wasn't a wife anymore. So it was like all these things that I used to kind of gauge and build my identity were gone. And part of what I am is a sexual being. And so it made sense then for me to take a look at my sexual identity, which partly, it had to do with me, but it also had to do with what other people told me. What people told me was acceptable. And I think of our parents being our first reflection of who we are. We're looking up to them as babies. They're like holding a mirror for us. But sometimes that mirror is cracked because our parent might be unhealthy or shamed themselves. And so what's reflected to us isn't necessarily an accurate reflection of who we are. And that can certainly come through when it comes to sexuality and shame. If, guilt is about action and shame is more about character. So maybe as children, parents gave us a shaming message about sex and we internalize it. And we don't know any better. That's just kind of seeps inside of us, and that lingers with us as we grow up. And then if what we want or what we experience doesn't align with what they taught us, what people taught us about sex, then we have sexual shame. And that can be just such a big deal. And it's so, so common. You're right. Purity culture recovery is the second most common thing. First, people come to me typically with fear of hell. And then sexual stuff is right on the heels of that, usually.
Yeah. And so you mentioned purity culture a few times, and I know I definitely came from that too. And it was a whole thing. And it's kind of like a whole extra level. They just leveled up, I think, some of the shame and guilt around sex. But for people that aren't familiar with what that is, could you describe a little bit about purity culture and how people might have experienced that?
Sure. Yeah, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and so we didn't call it purity culture. We just called it you better keep your legs closed, young lady. And that's kind of the sex education that I got from my mother. But so typically we think of Abrahamic religions when we're talking about purity culture, and definitely evangelicalism. And in my book, I think I put it as purity culture is the obsession with virginity and forced abstinence, including the attempted control of the bodies of girls and women and the minds of boys and men. It's common in Abrahamic religions, insisting that the only acceptable sex is that between a married man and woman. And anything else is off the table. You're not supposed to think about it. You're certainly not supposed to do it. And that's kind of what what we were left with. And I remember even as my body was changing, and I was really young, I was like a 10-year-old girl. And then my body is changing, and I'm trying to figure out what is going on. And then I'm starting to get attention from older boys and men. And I mean, I was still a child, but I looked older than I was. And it was just confusing. And my parents were not super helpful there. So I'm definitely absorbed from them that sex was something that was supposed to wait until marriage. I was supposed to be a virgin, got my air quotes there, on my wedding night. So there was a lot of baggage to carry around.
Absolutely. I know we got very similar messaging where I was growing up, and we've had several people mentioning in the chat as well that was the case for them too. Um, and I know everybody's experience was a little bit different, but this particular thing seems to be prevalent across so many people who are recovering. And it's difficult to recover. We've had people mentioning comments in the chat, even just during this conversation, about how they had years later, even after their first sexual experience, just continuing to struggle with the negative feelings that came from it, that just seems to linger on, and dealing with, like you said, that shame or that guilt around it that they absorbed earlier on. Is there
Mhm.
is there a way for people to speed up that process of maybe getting rid of some of those feelings that we spent years
Right.
and years and years learning to have?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I just wanted to talk for a minute about even the idea, the concept of virginity. So I had, when I was growing up, my mother, it was a specific idea that as long as I did not have sex with a man, you know, his parts in my parts, I was a virgin. But so I mean, imagine my surprise years later to find that virginity is basically a social construct, really, because uh, it changes across time and culture. Some people think you're not a virgin if you have different types of sex than P and V sex. Like people and groups and individuals have different ideas about it, but typically the concept is used to control people. So it's not based on scientific or biologic evidence, but on myths, beliefs, and norms that can be harmful, oppressive, and discriminatory. And that was really shocking for me. And it also was very liberating for me to find out, because then I felt like, you mean I don't have to be carrying around this baggage that wasn't mine to begin with? Because that's what shame is like. It's like someone comes with a package, a big package, and it says shame, and they're trying to give it to you. They say, "Here, take this," and we can actually, now we're adults, we can say, "I'm not going to take that. That's yours. That doesn't belong to me, and I don't want it." But when we're children, we don't know that, of course, and so we just tend to internalize what our parents and elders tell us. But so I found learning about virginity to be really empowering. And now that I said all that, I got to remember what you asked. Oh, what can people what can people do as they try and
Yes.
find their way out? Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. So the probably one of the first places I would start is really asking myself questions about my beliefs. What messaging did I receive about sex and sexuality? And maybe how old was I when I got that messaging? Who gave me the messages? Because, like I said earlier, it's possible that the person who was giving us the message, they had their own shame that they had not dealt with, and so that came through when they were talking to us. So really exploring the messages that we received about sex, and then seeing what are some healthier messages that we can swap out for those. Because sometimes it's like a tape recording, just comes up even without us thinking of it. So we want to be aware when those thoughts come up and confront them and really take a look and say, but is that accurate? Or was that just what my mother or my so and so, that's what they thought? It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the truth. So exploring the messages, and then, of course, giving ourselves permission to be curious. Maybe it's the first time in our life that we're ever giving ourselves permission to be curious about our own body, about what feels good, about what we like. And it doesn't mean you have to, that you're going to run out and get the most X-rated whatever. We can start gently. We can watch a rom-com. We can watch something, watch a movie or a show, and just think, how do I feel about that character? How do I feel about the relationship that they're showing, the way they're treating each other? Is that something I would like? And then, we can watch some things that maybe show a little more intimacy than that did. So we give ourselves permission and self-compassion, being gentle with ourselves as we're exploring and looking at it as something fun and exciting, not something that's shameful and bad, something that, wow, I actually get to do this. I'm going to be in this body hopefully another 50 years or so. I want to make the most of it. I want to learn the most I can about this body and what this body likes, and even what this body doesn't like. But it's up to me to find out. So those are some of the things that I would encourage. Also, of course, reaching out to Secular Therapy Project or myself or some other professional secular therapist who understands purity culture and potentially sexual shame, because there's a lot to unpack there when religion is involved.
Well, yeah, and you make a great point about kind of having to unpack that because I was even thinking as you were talking about, oh, watching a show. And when I was growing up, even something as simple as watching a rom-com that might have like a little bit of a steamy scene in it, that was a big no. You shouldn't be seeing that. That's sinful, that's lustful. You should feel bad about even looking at that. And that by itself may even be a hurdle for some people to be able to do, right? Don't even
Mhm.
get me started on, having your own sexual experiences, but even just watching that, may be a big step, right?
Right. And we know that repression leads to obsession. And I feel like that's a big, big issue uh, in how we kind of look at sex in North America, at least in the United States and in Canada. It's that repression. And then everything gets driven underground because obviously, we have a drive to procreate. We enjoy sex. We want to be sexual, and so then when we can't do it or we're told we can't do it, we're still going to find a way to do it. So really being more upfront about it. And I really encourage parents also to be talking with their kids about consent, of course, right from the time the kids are small, even something as simple as, uh, you know, can I give you a hug? Would you like a hug? Do you want to hug Aunt Julie? Giving them permission that they don't have to allow people to touch them or to touch their stuff, things that they own or that they're carrying with them to school. So getting them used to the idea that they have to give consent, but also that they should be asking consent of their friends and playmates on the school ground before touching them. Just really normalizing that aspect of autonomy for them. I think that's really important. And then as they get older, of course, you're using age specific words, talking with them about their bodies and letting them know some of the changes that they can expect. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm 55 now, and I had no idea when I was in my 20s and 30s how my body would change, and my hormones are changing, and just the way that my body adjusts to things seems to be changing as well. So educating myself still, even all these years later, so that I know what might be coming, down the road for me. So it's not going to be a surprise. And so I know how to get the most out of the sex that I'm having right now. Because it has to, for me, I want to feel good. Like it has to feel good. And good means different things for different people. And that's part of the exploring that you get to do.
Yeah, for sure. And so what I love about your kind of approach to this is you kind of have like the title of your book, for instance, is Divorcing Religion, and you sort of have talked about it in that way of you were divorcing religion, but you were also divorcing yourself from a lot of these kind of relationship patterns and rules and dynamics. And I don't know if you would like to take a few minutes to tell us about how that looked for you from going from a Minicostal, I believe, is
The
how
word
you
I used, yep.
described it. Yes, yes. To what are some of those frameworks that you had to discard?
Right. So of course, when I was growing up and getting the messages about why would a man buy the cow if he could get the milk for free? My mom loved to say that and kind of compare me to a cow, I guess. But um, so that to try and make me hold on to my virginity tighter. Well, once I got to be about 19 and I'd been with my boyfriend for a few years, I decided, you know what? I'm an adult now. That's the age of majority in Canada. And I'm going to let myself have sex with this person. And so we did. And it was meh, meh was one of the answers. Fortunately, it was like meh. But then within a few months, he broke up with me. And then I was just devastated. And then all the horrible purity culture type things came flooding back. You're chewed gum, you're used Kleenex, all these terrible ways for me to feel about myself, which I didn't need because I was already feeling massively rejected. And then that went on for a few years. So to try and prove that I was still desirable, became a barfly. I was just at the bar all the time and would go home with anyone who showed any interest at all because my self-esteem was really hurting at that point. Yeah, thank you. And it made me, yeah, I was just so sad. That went on for a few years. Then I had my back to Jesus moment around 23 or so. And then it went through my house and got rid of anything that was about sex or anything that might not be pleasing to God, however I thought that would be. And then went back to church, and my pastor introduced me to a man they set me up. We had nothing in common other than we were both Christians. And so, of course, we decided to get married. And I was telling my pastor at the time, I said, "Oh, I'm not a virgin." And because my soon to be husband was a virgin. And so I just felt bad about that. And my pastor said, in true Pentecostal style, "I declare you a secondary virgin. You are a secondary virgin. So you just don't worry about it." And in a way, you know what? That actually made me feel better about myself. And so that was okay. So I married this person, and marriage was challenging, and we stayed married for almost 20 years. But then towards the end of that second decade, I lost my faith, and then I lost a lot of the reasons about why I was with this person. Did I want to stay married to this person that I married only because we were both Christians? And did we actually have anything in common? And especially if I was losing my faith, I didn't really know if he was losing his because we weren't talking about it. There were a lot of other things that were going on. But I knew that I there were parts of myself that I wanted to be able to experience that I hadn't experienced. Even in that time, I was backslidden in my early 20s. And I thought, this is the one life that I have. I want to see what it's like to be with other women. I want to see what it's like to not to have the confines of marriage on me. And so we did divorce. And then I decided I would deny myself nothing. And I denied myself nothing. And I think it was a shock for people who'd known me for a long time. Certainly was shocking for my children, who were in their teens at that point. Um, but yeah, I decided I was going to let myself try anything. And I was had a new partner who was quite wealthy and literally said, "You can try anything you want, and I'll support you, and I'll pay for it," and this sort of thing. And it was it almost felt like the adolescence that I didn't have when I was a teenager, because even when I was backslidden, there was still a lot of religious baggage there. But at this time in my 40s, I knew. I just was like, no, I don't believe in those things anymore. So I'm going to try what I want to try. And I did. And I really liked some of it. And I really didn't care for some of it. And it was messy. You hold that beach ball underwater for long enough and the pressure builds. And then finally you take your hands off and the ball goes up and water gets everywhere. It's so messy. And that's what my deconversion was like. And that's part of why I do the work that I do with other people who are in the process of divorcing religion. If I can help mitigate, some of the potentially disastrous consequences that can come our way, because it'd be helpful for them to be able to talk to me as someone who's been there and as a counselor, then I want to be able to offer that for people. And so now here I am. I'm married again, again to a man, and very happy and very satisfied. And I love the life that I'm living. And I'm so happy to be able to be here with people like you and share some of my experiences.
Well, I am so happy that you are sharing your experiences with us too. You have such a fascinating story, and I am just blown away that after, how deep you got into this with, where you told us you wearing head coverings. I mean, you were like the stay at home homeschooling the
Yep.
kids
Mhm.
mom situation. I mean, that's the kind of thing that it can be hard for people to dig themselves out of. Um,
Mhm.
what do you think it was that kind of helped you realize, okay, no, even though this is going to be really difficult, but I am ready to take a complete left turn from this and come out of this without, feeling. It sounds like you were ready. You were not feeling guilty and shameful anymore after you got out of that. What kind of gave you that push to get out, do you think?
I think just feeling for so long like I was only getting crumbs off of a table. That's what I felt like. That's what my marriage felt like. And to some extent, I think even that's what my Christian relationship with God felt like. It was a lot of me, begging and asking and pleading and not receiving what I wanted or what I needed from that. And so when I got to the point that I realized this is never going to work for me, because it's totally one-sided, then I gave myself permission to go. And actually, one of my big brothers gave me some great advice. He said, Jan, no one's coming to rescue you. You must save yourself. And I thought that was such good advice because that's the opposite of what we're taught in Christianity. God is all powerful and God will rescue us, God will save us. But the truth is, essentially, you came into this world alone and you're going to have to figure shit out on your own and take responsibility for your actions and go out there and see what you can do, see what fun there is to be had.
Well, I'm glad you did do that because I think you've been having a lot of fun, and we have a lot of fun chatting with you and learning from you as well. Um, I want to ask you about a term that you used a couple of times. You mentioned being backslidden. And I think you're referring, we had that term in my church too, where you are, I guess you're still a believer, but you're not really towing the line the way you're supposed to. Is that what
Mhm.
you mean by that? And
Yeah.
I find it interesting that you still use that term. Um,
Yeah.
is that how you kind of think of that time in your life?
Yes, only because it's like I had been taught to be a certain way, and I was rejecting that way. But even when I rejected it, it's like I still couldn't fully enjoy myself because I knew that I really actually had to go back to church and get right with God. And so the terminology that we had for that in my Pentecostal home and church was the idea of being backslidden. And so that's what I was. That's how I felt. But now I see it as I was actually trying to break free. I wanted something different, but it was very hard to break free from that, especially having very religious parents and being married to a pastor. Like church was a very big, regular part of our life, and I was worried at first for my children too. I thought I don't want my kids to go to hell. Because I've rejected God. I thought, what if I'm wrong? And I had to work through that on my own as well and get to a point where I was comfortable. Um, that I didn't worry about hell anymore.
So you were going through two to three of the most common struggles that we often see in people when they come out of religion. So you were definitely the kind of the poster child for making it through, and I love that you then turned right around and decided to help other people find their way out as well. Was that I am assuming that was kind of the impetus for you going into counseling and all of this, or to help
Yes.
other
Well,
people.
I'm sure you know that a great majority of the people who go into mental health work are trying to figure their own stuff out there. And I was no different, trying to figure out what is my trauma? So I knew I had some PTSD and even some complex PTSD, but I wasn't entirely sure why. And it wasn't until I started um, doing my studies that I actually found Dr. Marlene Winnell, and Marlene's book is called Leaving the Fold, and her group is called Journey Free. And Leaving the Fold is one of the pioneering works about religious trauma. And she's the one that came up with the phrase religious trauma syndrome or RTS, just talking about a collection of symptoms that we can have. when we have spent time in a high demand religious group. So once I discovered Marlene and started actually connecting with other people, and then of course after that I found out about recovering from religion and Dr. Ray, and then I was just off to the races at that point.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to ask you about religious trauma syndrome. That's one of the things that is kind of a, I guess you could say, a hot topic right now. Perhaps I'm biased given that we talk about that kind of thing a lot here. But what is that? And is that different from quote unquote regular trauma? What makes it religious trauma syndrome?
Right. So when Dr. Winnell came up with that phrase, she was using it uh, just really to be a placeholder, say for a collection of symptoms that we can experience when we have spent time in a authoritarian, high demand religious community. And then also sometimes that means the home that we grew up in. Often it does. So when we're in the group, we have losses, like we lose our autonomy, lose our independence, lose out on relationships, these sorts of things. And then when we leave that group, when we divorce religion, we suffer loss again on top of that, because then we lose our community, our worldview, our identity. And the losses, the symptoms can be physical. People might have trouble sleeping, they might have disordered eating, um, just all sorts of things that can go along with that. Relationally, they might struggle with anger. They might have real issues forming and keeping relationships with people if religious trauma has played in there. So there's a lot that can be a part of religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome.
Mm. Okay, yeah, thank you for explaining that. I know that's something that can definitely be experienced by people who are coming to recover from religion. That seems like a likely culprit to perhaps
Right.
investigate. Uh,
Yeah. And the demand for purity is often so unrealistic. I mean, look at the
mhm.
world that we live in. Even children, unfortunately, if they have cell phones, they have internet, at some point, there are going to be porn images that show
Mm.
up for them, and potentially even predators online. So we really can't pretend. We can't ignore and pretend like that the world is not like this, because this is the way the world is with the technology that we have. So
Mhm.
instead, teaching children about their bodies, about their autonomy, I think is such a powerful starting place for people. But also, the idea that pleasure is our birthright. Sexual pleasure is our birthright. And so encouraging people to learn about their bodies and what feels good to them. A yes, no, maybe list. I love that idea. I don't know if everybody here is familiar with a yes, no, maybe list. So we're talking about intimate things. What do you like to do? What would you be willing to try? And so many of us have never even thought of it, especially if we grew up in a Christian or kind of fundamentalist environment. But it's actually a decent exercise for us to do, to consider what would I be willing to try, even if would I like to have sexy talk or whatever with a partner, doing sexting, that sort of thing. Would I feel comfortable with that, or would I feel comfortable if I have sex with someone? Uh, would I feel comfortable if they were talking about what we did in that group of people and I wasn't there? Or do I have certain names for my body parts that I use, or words that I would like my partner to use? And then you're talking about, how do I like to be touched? Do I want to be pinched or tickled or anything like that? You can kind of go into it as deeply as you want. But I just think it's a good exercise as we're getting to know ourselves sexually, as sexual beings, and what we like.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you give very kind of straightforward things that people can do. And it seems like a lot of this starts with people thinking through what they like themselves before getting into something with an additional partner. Is that something that you generally recommend to people?
Yeah, I really do. And certainly when we are with a partner, they're not going to be able to read our mind, and we
Mhm.
can't read their mind. So it might be that the last partner that I was with really enjoyed it when I did something specific, but this next partner really might not enjoy that at all. So this is kind of also where the idea of consent comes in. Before I, right away jump into something, I want to know, is this something that the partner's interested in, or would that feel good to them? Or are they curious about it? Or is that maybe off limits to them for whatever reason they may have? So just that open lines of communication. And also we can get used to saying no, because that's
Mhm.
something, if we grew up in fundamentalist homes, we often didn't have that opportunity to say no. So we're allowed to say no and practice saying no. And actually, for a lot of people, I'd say those assigned female at birth, I do encourage them sometimes either to take self-defense classes, because not because I think they're going to run into trouble, but because in a lot of those classes you have to yell. They encourage you to yell and use your voice. And many of us have been very disconnected from our bodies as part of purity culture. So I want people to get used to using their voice and using their body.
Love it. I love the idea of self-defense classes as just kind of an exercise in using your voice. Whether you
Sure,
use it,
sure.
whether you need the physical pieces of it or not.
Right. And then some people really like to do dancing or yoga or boxing or whatever it is, ways to get in touch with our body again, because our body was essentially off limits to us, or pleasure was off limits to us. And so we can have the trauma stored in our body, and we want to have ways to help work it out.
Absolutely. Well, where was I? Sorry, I had another question and then I lost it. It left my brain immediately as I started to open my mouth. But that's yeah, I love the idea of having these kind of specific things that people can do. Do you have any other like books or techniques or places people can go to start? I know for some people, maybe they're not yet ready to go and speak with a counselor or to call up the secular therapy project or anything like that, or it may not be accessible to them. But are there any good resources for people that they can just access on their own if maybe they're not ready to talk about
Sure.
it out loud?
Yeah, I've got some books here behind me. The top one, so Divorcing Religion, but I have Sex and God. That's Dr. Ray's book. Very important, great book. And then right underneath it, I have one called Becoming Cliterate by Dr. Lori Mintz. So I have a ton of resources and links that I'd be very happy to send out to anybody. And I have tons of resources also in my book. So there's a QR code in there, and people just get that QR code, and then it opens up to all these different resources. And because there are courses that people can take about getting to know their own bodies and relationships, and lots of people are very interested in sex therapy. I mean, the sky's the limit. If you're interested, you can find stuff out there. And we also better have a little chat about ethical porn, because I know porn is something a lot of people get stuck on. And we certainly received messaging, if we grew up in a fundamentalist home, that it's bad, it's terrible. A lot of Christians are really apt to claim something as a porn addiction or a sex addiction, when that is not the case. But so the idea of ethical porn, there are porn sites out there where all the actors, so I'm talking about anyone who's in the porn, uh, they are being adequately compensated financially. They're there because they want to be there. They are actors. This is the work that they are doing. They're being protected while they're there. They're using condoms. They're doing whatever they need to do to protect against potential STIs or STDs. And these are people who are making their living off this, rather than going to Pornhub, we don't really know. Maybe someone has been coerced, maybe somebody has been trafficked. We don't want to participate or give any money to people that are doing that. That's why I really like the idea of ethical porn instead.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up. We get that question from time to time when we talk about sex. That tends to come up, and people oftentimes wonder, okay, yes, I've heard about ethical porn. I want to make sure I'm consuming that, but how do we know if that's what we're consuming?
When I was doing my book, I literally was Googling ethical porn articles, ethical porn sites. And so I did list them, a bunch of them in my book with you need the QR code. I think one that I remember, I think her name was Erica Lust. I hope I'm getting that right, but she was quite popular. Oh, yeah, of course. And so OnlyFans, I see someone has a question there about OnlyFans. Um, I happen to think OnlyFans is just great. I have no problem with it at all. I see it as people on there making money the way that they want to make money. They are in control, they are in charge of it. Now, I'm not on OnlyFans, so I would hope they have age limits and things like that. I actually have an OnlyFans content creator. She was a pastor, and now she's quite a successful OnlyFans content creator. She will be speaking at the Shameless Sexuality conference. She's going to be speaking to us twice during the weekend. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, I am now looking forward to that too. And I would love to know, does she do like religious themed costumes or props in any of her content? Like does she work that into her content, the fact that she was previously a
Oh,
minister?
I think she does because I've also interviewed her on my podcast. Her name is Nicole Mitchell. And she said a lot of people who contact her on OnlyFans have come out of religious backgrounds. And so they actually end up talking a lot about purity culture. So she's delightful. I have really enjoyed talking to her every time I've spoken with her. So yeah, I think she'll be good.
I love that. Well, while we're on the topic, who else is going to be at the conference that we should look forward to? I mean, obviously everyone, but
Yeah, yes. Okay, I have it right here because I hope that we talk about that. Beloved Dr. Darrel Ray is going to be talking about masturbation, porn, and your sex life, a philosophy of sexuality throughout the life cycle. Dr. Caden Vargas is a trans non binary psychologist specializing in religious trauma and queer psychosocial development. And Dr. Vargas will be talking about healing beyond the binary, transgender expansiveness, sexualities, and overcoming religious residue. Nicole Mitchell, who I just told you is a pastor turned pleasure coach, OnlyFans content creator. She's going to be talking about turning your pleasure into profit without feeling icky. And sex and money is actually the whole point. That's her second one. And then I have a former LDS, so former Mormon woman who is a current adult entertainer and OnlyFans content creator. And she'll be actually doing some dance for us. And her talk is Unlocking Sensuality Through Somatic Striptease. And then Mike Phillips is a counselor specializing in sex and trauma, going to be talking about the mechanism of sexual shame. And then we have folks talking about sex, relationships, and trauma. Purity culture researcher Tessie Muskrat is going to be talking about voices from the bedroom. Purity culture survivors talk about finding healing. Our own Glenda Jackson, is going to be talking about deconstructing monogamy post-religion, an introduction into polyamory. And then even a couple more folks talking about embracing your sexy self, literally and figuratively. I'm trying to get something for everybody in this event, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, I am super excited about this. And so, what about now that it's virtual? Is it going to be recorded so that people could access it after the fact if they maybe
Yes.
aren't available right that minute to see it live?
Exactly. Yes, that's such a great question. So the $99 ticket is the all access ticket or all access pass. And so that lets people attend the live online event and participate in QA, and they get access to all the recordings after. That one's $99. And then there's one that I just call a resources ticket, and that's for $50. These are American dollars. And for that one, it's just access to the recordings after. And that's really helpful for a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. As much as I love having in-person events for a lot of reasons, it's sure is nice to have a virtual option where you can
Oh, yeah.
access it even if you're not going to be able to be there at that time or
Yes,
at that location.
and if people if you have a podcast or a resource or something like that that you want to get in front of people related to purity culture or religious trauma, let me know, because I still have sponsorship slots available. They start at $50 and go up to $500. And so then it just kind of has to do with how much publicity you get throughout the weekend. So if you have something that you're interested in sharing about, let me know. We also have a virtual exhibit hall for resources that people want to let others know about.
Ooh, excellent. Okay. I cannot wait. I am definitely going to be coming to this. So thank you for sharing this with us. We definitely wanted to get you on the show beforehand so that we could let
Thank you.
everyone know about it, because this is one of those things that people are really constantly seeking resources about. And we
Mhm.
need more resources about, and we need to make them available to people at whatever point they are kind of in their recovery from it. I know it was probably for me years before it was something that I would want to talk with someone out loud about. Now I don't mind at all. Here we are talking about it on the internet for everyone, but
Yes.
there's a spectrum of comfort levels that probably lie in between there. And I know for some people, being able to just go and pull the resource and look at it themselves is a good first step.
Yes. Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
Awesome. Okay, well, we do have a whole ton of questions that people
Oh,
want to ask you. Should we go? I know it's a little early to go to questions, but this is the thing. When we're talking about sex, it turns out people have questions about sex.
hey. All
So
right.
before we do, oh wait, before we do that, we have to do that. Let's talk about the poll questions. Then we'll go to audience questions. So if you have a question for Janice, go ahead and keep asking, but let's look at the questions that we asked y'all before we do that. Let me see here. So let's share the results so people can see. Okay, so at the beginning of the show, we asked 4 questions, and the first one we asked was sex before marriage shamed in your family of origin? And it looks like the consensus was yes. 67% of the people who responded said yes. Only 6% said no. 22% said that we didn't discuss it. 2% are still wondering what sex is, and 4% are not really sure. Um, that's a huge amount of people that either experienced shame around it, or it was so taboo that they never even covered it. Does that track with your experience as far as those numbers?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yes, for so many people who it was shamed in their family, but also that we just didn't discuss it. Like we just pretended it wasn't even a thing. Like
Mhm.
you're going to have to find out on your own because we are not going to talk about it.
Yeah, and this is probably coming from shame that the parents or the caregivers have experienced themselves, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Ah,
yeah. for sure. And even, I mean, I left religion when my kids were in their teens, but I went from being, quite repressive about it to telling them, you can literally ask me anything you want to about sex. I will give you an honest answer. It might take me a little while to collect myself and figure out how best to answer you, but there's nothing off limits. Your health and safety is my primary concern.
Oh, I love that. And so did they ever share with you later about how that was for them to go from that's kind of a complete 180, right? From we're not going to talk about it to ask me anything. Did they ever reflect back on that and let you know?
Well, I remember when one of my daughters, I think she was 19, and she was having to see a urologist, and so she brought me with her, and the urologist said to her, you know, "Are you sure you want your mother in here? Like we can just talk alone." And she said, "Of course I don't want my mother in here. My mother can hear anything about my life." And I actually felt really pleased that she felt that way and that she wanted me just to be there to support her. And then later on, do we have time for one quick story? Because I actually think it's very
Yes,
hilarious.
absolutely.
So I lived upstairs with my partner at the time, and one of my daughters lived downstairs with her partner at the time. And it turned out we were all moving at once. We were all moving out of the same house, and so we were putting our boxes on the porch. She had hers in one part, I had mine in one part, and they were like giveaway stuff. And so I saw she had a box, and it looked like Tupperware kitchen type stuff. And I said, "Honey, if you're not going to use this anymore, can I have it? I could use some extra Tupperware." She's like, "Yeah, no problem, Mom." Oh, so we get to my new place, and I'm in the kitchen and I'm opening up the box that says Tupperware. First, I pull out furry handcuffs, and then I pull out a ball gag, and and I thought it was the most hilarious thing ever. So I took a picture of it and I texted her and I said, Content's not as advertised. Do you want this back?" And she's like, "Oh my God, Mommy." I just thought that was really funny. And I said, "You know what? Hooray for you. I am so glad that I have a daughter who knows what she likes and feels comfortable using some toys. So good for you."
Amazing. And now we know the risks of trying to disguise that kind of material when you move. It may end up in
Remember
the
which
wrong
box it's
place.
in.
Yes. Remember the codes. I love that. But I think you're right. That is so key. I don't have kids, so I'm not going to speak on what parents need to do and not do, but something that I think we definitely put people at risk with is when we have this sort of culture of not being able to talk with your parents or with knowledgeable adults or older siblings or aunts and uncles or anything about sex, because that puts kids at risk of being taken advantage of being tricked, of being
Mhm.
lied to. Because if you're not getting good information and you don't have anyone that you can confide in, if something happens to you that is not okay or not consensual, who are you going to tell? And I think there are predators and people with malintentions that are absolutely prepared to take advantage of that lack of information and lack of
Mhm.
ability to confide. So I think
Mhm.
that was huge that you made that available to your kids. So thank you for doing that. Okay, let's go to the next question. It was, did you wait to have sex, however you define what that means, until you were married? And this one, we had 10% of people said yes, 63% said no. And this is one where people could pick multiple answer choices, so it may add up to more
Mhm.
than 100. 18% of people said I've never been married, 16% said I've never had sex, 6% said I waited for marriage to do certain types of sex acts, and 6% said does not apply. Now, I find it very interesting and not at all surprising that a large number of people said, no, I did not wait
I
until
love that.
marriage. because most people don't, right? Even in purity culture settings, it's an important value. It's something you're taught is the most important thing you could possibly do. But that's not a very realistic expectation, right?
No, no, it's really not. And actually that's why I feel like it's even more important now to be hosting this Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture now that you have the current administration in the government and Project 2025, because they are wanting to squash information and they will be sending out misinformation and disinformation regarding sexuality, and even trying to prevent teachers from teaching basic sex ed, calling it pornographic or whatever ways they are going to try and keep young people from getting access to the information that they need, not to mention, coming down hard against the rights of women to have bodily autonomy. So the current administration is really going to be trying to repress sexuality. And I want us to continue shouting about it and letting people know and normalizing it and talking about it.
And yeah, I think that is so important as well. Why do you think that is, that sexuality and particularly repression of people's sexuality is so important in some of these kind of religious conservative circles? Why is this the foundational thing that has to be taught to children in that?
Right. I think it's just control, largely control, and particularly trying to control girls and women.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that is really key for us to keep our eye on in these times. And that
Mhm,
is all I will say
mhm,
about that.
mhm.
Okay. Next question was your first time having sex with another person how you expected it to be? And we have a range of answers on this one. The most common answer at 37% was it was kind of meh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably pretty reasonable to expect, right? It's the first time. Uh
Especially if you're both virgins. I mean, and when I say virgin, I mean you both have never done it before with each
mhm.
other. And so you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know your body, and you don't know their body, and you know.
Yeah. So don't need to have unrealistic expectations about how it's going to go. Although 16% of people said yes, it was magical. But
That's pretty nice. That's
that
pretty
is pretty
nice.
nice. Yeah. We also had some people that said it was not good, it was not consensual, or they have
Mhm.
never done it before, or they don't know or don't remember. And that's also completely valid. I think to your earlier point about virginity being this thing that we make up to be such a huge deal, it's made up. We don't have to walk around, with that, oh, the first time it was this special magical, it was this life-changing ordeal. It's not like that.
Oh, and the church does such a disservice when it tells people you got to say no, 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 no until you say some magic words in front of an audience, and then you're magically married, and then you get to flip that switch, and you're going to have the most blissful sexual union ever. But that is not usually the case, because there's so much baggage by that point attached to our thoughts about sex and pleasure and our body. It can take a long time for people to get comfortable with having sex then.
Oh, yes. I mean, this idea that, okay, you need to feel shameful and guilty about it for all these years. And then, like you said, as soon as you say the magic words, it's fine now. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be great. Well, that's not really how feelings work about things. I know a lot of people, even struggle with things like vaginismus, or
Yes.
I've heard of people, explaining that, they had like a panic attack or something, not because they didn't want to be doing it. They were expecting to enjoy the experience, but they'd had so
Mhm.
many years of feeling a certain type of way about it. And turns out that didn't just flip off like a switch when it was time.
Mhm.
Ugh. Okay, well, that brings us to our last question that we asked, which was, is sex getting better for you as you age? And 35% of people said yes, it definitely is. 8% said no, 4% said it stayed about the same. And actually, just as many people as who said yes, 35% said, I'm not currently having sex. And 18% of people said something else. That's I think that's fine. We spend a lot of time talking about, let's celebrate sex, shameless sexuality and all of that. But we've had some people in the chat talking about this too, saying, this is just not something that I've ever decided to do. Maybe I'll do it later. Maybe I won't. It's not right for me. But do you find this percentage to be kind of consistent with what you encounter too, where not everyone is interested in doing this?
I haven't ever asked this question before in a group about is sex getting better for you as you age.
Oh,
I was thinking of myself because
yeah.
it's my second marriage, and I'm not a Christian and didn't bring that stuff with me, and it's wonderful. And I'm older now, right? Because I got divorced when I was around 40 or 42 or something like that. Now I'm
Mhm.
55, and my husband is 22 and a half years older than me. So knowing about how our bodies change and how our libido might change and things like that, I feel like I know myself better than I ever have, and I know what feels really good, and I'm super comfortable with my partner as well. So for me, those things all go into sex getting better as I age, but that's
Mhm.
not the case for everyone. People are different.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And people don't have to be having sex if they don't want to be having sex. That's part of consent, right?
Yes, yes.
Saying
Hmm.
no, I'm not interested at all is also a valid option.
Oh, yes. Or, your erection is not my emergency. You can take care of things yourself. And even that can be, I mean, that feels empowering for me to be able to say, but also it might feel empowering to my partner if they were shamed for masturbating and told that they should never do it, to have your partner say, "Hey, have at her, like enjoy." That can also feel very liberating for a partner.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, well, those were fun questions. I'm glad we asked those. And I love seeing a range of responses on these because I think to me, one of the things that went along with all this purity culture and the shame was that because you couldn't talk about it, you didn't know what was quote unquote normal and what wasn't. And so you, of course, assume that everything that's happening to you is weird and abnormal and there's something wrong with me, no matter what it is. If it's different than the thing that you were taught that was, very limited, and I think it's really important to kind of recognize that there are a lot of different experiences, and that's fine. And
Right. And that's actually where support groups can be
Mhm.
really helpful sometimes when we're talking about recovering from religious trauma or whatever the support group is, because sometimes we if we only had this one experience, we might want to ask, this is how it was for me. Is that how it was for other people in the group?
Mhm.
And we might be really shocked when some say, oh yeah, totally, and some say no, it wasn't how it was at all. And so just getting those different points of view can be helpful
Mhm.
too.
Yes. Well, thank you for asking the good questions. And now we have questions. So,
All right.
okay, let's go to and before we go to that, let me drop your links in the chat again. We have your book, Divorcing Religion, as well as The Shameless Sexuality. And people can also just go straight to your website to get a consultation or a session with you.
That's
And,
right.
and also, you've got your YouTube channel, right?
Oh, yes. And I really want everyone to go to my YouTube channel because I have so many videos on there all about religious trauma and recovery. So I'm posting in there all the events, my previous conferences, sessions. So there's so much helpful information and it's free for you. Make sure your therapist knows about it too, because it'll be helpful for them too.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, great. Well, I dropped those in the chat. Can recommend. Okay. Well, Martin, would you like to start us off with one of the questions?
Absolutely. So I think this was touched on a little bit, but this question was here. So we'll see if we get a little bit more into this. So our first question is sexual repression and purity culture why we see so much sexual abuse in religion?
Ooh, what a good What a good question. Uh, that may have something to do with it. I tend to think also it has to do with the fact that predators like easy prey, prey. And so, if we're talking about churches, unfortunately, people, obedience is demanded and forgiveness is demanded. I call forgiveness the other F word because predators and abusers will weaponize the concept of forgiveness. So actually, what we need to be doing is empowering people. They get to make the choice. If someone has harmed them in some way, they need to come to a point of accepting, yes, this thing was actually done to me. This really did happen. And now I get to decide how I'm going to proceed. So I might want to cut the person off. I might want to press charges, or I might decide, something wasn't that bad. And so, okay, I will forgive. But it's your wound, your choice, your power.
Okay, so we have another question here. Someone is wondering about what if someone is asexual? Can they be in a relationship or paired with someone who does enjoy sex? And how does that work? And obviously, I'm sure that would very much vary depending on the circumstances.
Yes.
But do you have any
Yeah.
advice for navigating that kind of thing where people have a very different set of preferences or amount that they want sex, if at all?
Yep. And I mean, the big key being communication. We have to be able to talk with our partners about what we want and what we don't want, what we feel like, and then it's for each of us in the unit to decide how we want the relationship to work. And I know Glenda is going to be talking about this some at the conference as well. And just being comfortable with ourselves and our own decisions and what we want to do. So I think that one really varies from relationship to relationship.
Great. So I've got a question here. Hopefully I'm gonna phrase this one correctly. So correct me if I am wrong here on this one. So when someone is leaving religion and purity culture, how do they know if they are asexual or if the purity culture is affecting them?
Oh, wow. That is such a great question. And so part of um, the process of leaving and figuring out our own identity and who we are, we need to be educating ourselves, the process of psychoeducation, reading books, watching videos, going to reputable websites to learn all the different terms, even and what they mean. Because things were uh, we had a much narrower focus, I think, when I was growing up. Now we understand that there are so many different things when it comes to sex and gender identity and all these different things. So I feel very much like that's something that's personal that a person needs to educate themselves about. And I feel like I only answered half that question, but I can't remember the whole question.
Well, and it was about if someone having left purity culture and as they
Mm.
explore themselves after that fact, could they possibly, and they probably could be, someone could be asexual or are they still repressed because of the purity culture and I guess probably
Right.
digging their way out?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that actually is a reasonable question for someone to ask because we are so highly and deeply conditioned when we grow up in fundamentalism. And certainly I have people asking or considering, well, maybe I'm not even heterosexual. Maybe that's just how I was conditioned to be. How do I know? And so then, I would say uh, proceed with caution. Give yourself permission to see what feels good to you, what turns you on, what doesn't turn you on. Just being curious without being judgmental. We want to swap out the judgment for curiosity whenever possible. And that can be a fun time for people to learn about themselves.
Well, I'm going to throw a little add on to that because I'm
Sure.
curious if someone finds themselves now out of purity culture, what
Mhm.
are some safe ways for them to be able to explore themselves to find out if they are in fact not asexual and purity culture was repressing them so much?
Yeah. So you might even start with things like fiction, like reading different stories or watching different shows. And just kind of letting your body tell you, letting your body respond and react as it does. Like, can you tell if something is exciting to you or feels good to you or leaves you wanting more? We can usually tell right away if we don't like it and we don't want anything to do with it. And so these are important messages for us to be able to discover about ourselves when we didn't even have the opportunity to question before.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of work that you have to do to relearn or learn for the first time a lot of these things that you missed out on or got misinformation about earlier
Mhm,
on.
mhm.
Um, yeah, so it may take time. Okay, next question. Is there any research or like studies about the negative effects of shame, repression, or purity culture? Is this something people are publishing on and finding you may experience these side effects?
Right. Yeah. I'm so pleased now that we do actually have people researching in the field of religious trauma and purity culture. So pardon me, I had one lady who spoke at my last Shameless conference. Sarah Mosliner is her name, and her whole interest is purity culture. I think she's Dr. Sarah Mosliner. Um, so she's someone that has interesting information on it. And of course, Tessie Muskrat is a researcher who's going to be speaking. Um, Sarah Ortero, I believe, is someone else who does research. So bit by bit, I'm starting to interact with these researchers, but it's still a very new field. We won't have like I think really good answers and a big block of the research probably for years because it takes a while to do all the testing and figure everything out.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about that too. I think it's
Yeah.
one of those things where we don't always have research about the things that are, necessarily the most important to us to know about. There are a lot of things that go into determining what gets researched and what doesn't. And this is something that I think there is a huge need for more research in, and I hope we do get to see it.
Well, and I know the interest is really growing now in the topic because in the past 3 weeks, I had Zoom calls with two different directors and one producer, all out in Hollywood, LA area, all working on different projects and wanting my input about religious trauma. And one was specifically about purity culture. So that makes me really happy thinking that, okay, the concept of religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome is making it into the mainstream consciousness. So people are starting to recognize religion is not necessarily benign. A lot of times it's harmful.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I'm so encouraged to hear that this is something
Mhm.
that we're starting to look at and take seriously and address. So fantastic. I'm excited that you're involved in all of that too. That sounds interesting.
Well, I got to participate in the documentary, the Leaving Jesus documentary, and that was filmed through Marlene Winnell at some of her events. And it was a Swedish film crew that came and filmed over a number of years. And then they just released it last year in Stockholm. And so my husband and I flew out there to attend the red carpet and all this kind of stuff. That was really fun. So we look forward to Leaving Jesus sometime being shown in North America.
Oh, that's exciting. You're gonna have to let us know when that happens.
Hmm.
Then you'll have
Yeah.
to come back and make your ninth appearance, and we'll talk about it. Okay, what else do we have, Martin? I think we've got time for some more.
Yeah. Well, we do. I'm up next with a good question here. There is one coming up, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about it. But with this one, someone asked, why do some people have a hard time saying no?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. And a lot of times the answer is the C word, codependency. And codependency is built right into Christianity and into many other religions. And it's the idea where we live to serve. That's all we're going to do is just serve, serve, serve. And so if you're going to be serving, you're going to be kind of ignoring your own needs. And so many of us are raised in dysfunctional home environments, and codependency is just a coping mechanism. And what it often results in is one person in the relationship over functioning and the other one under functioning, and then the over functioner who's giving, giving, giving all the time can get hugely resentful because they don't say no. They don't think they can. They just wait and wait and wait, and everything builds up, and then they finally explode over, this tiny little thing. But it's really about the 10,000 other tiny little things. So part of our maturing process also is getting comfortable saying no. And you don't have to be a jerk about it. There's lots of different ways to say no, but boundaries, you might have heard the phrase fences make good neighbors. Boundaries are important. Boundaries improve relationships, and boundaries are vital. So we need to learn to say no. Thank you for that excellent question.
And there's another one here that's kind of related. So maybe we can go to that where someone is asking, and I think I'm understanding this correctly, but if not, let me know in the chat. Should we promote the act of explicit discourse confirming consent as a requirement for any sexual experience, instead of I think they're kind of saying that currently there's maybe an expectation to do mind reading or make an assumption, and if you ask out loud you seem lame. But what do you think about requiring verbal consent or checking in with the partner? When should people be doing that, I think, is the question.
Yeah, I love that idea. And it's definitely not something that has become totally mainstream yet, although I'm hopeful as we raise more and more generations of kids, if the parents in the home are teaching them the concept of bodily autonomy and the need for consent, that actually the kids, just by the time they're teenagers, are very comfortable saying, you know, can I do this with you? Would you like to do that? May I touch you? This sort of thing, so that it becomes more second nature for them. It's definitely not yet, but I think it's a good idea. And so when we're maybe starting out in a relationship with somebody, we can have that conversation and let them know consent is something that's really important to us because we were denied the ability when we were growing up maybe to offer consent or withhold consent. And so I hope you'll be okay with me asking you, before I touch you in this way, may I touch this part of your body? And some people will say yes, some people say no, but I think even just to be asked, a lot of people respond very well to that, just to being asked.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I would rather ask and be
Yeah,
surprised by the answer than not ask,
yeah,
and
yeah.
have a misunderstanding.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. All right. What else do we have?
Oh, want another question?
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
Um, so Kara, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to bump down from the one that I have highlighted there to a different one. So I'm skipping the line. I apologize. But I'm
We'll
curious
allow it.
about this one before we run out of time, because I think this is a good one to discuss. Do you see much trauma among men from purity culture, or is it mainly women?
Oh, yeah. Pardon me, I definitely do see it with men as well. And so, as I mentioned earlier, purity culture really attempts to control the bodies of girls and women and the minds of boys and men. And so telling them that they mustn't even think, an impure thought about a woman or a girl. And people, if you're someone who is already going to be very prone to taking things literally, and really believing and being all in there, then it can be even harder on these people after, even if they've managed to, break away from the church, break away from the fundamentalist religious setting. But it can be take a long time for us to break away from fundamentalist thinking, because we're used to that binary. It's either good or bad, it's either black or white. Um, so it can just take a while for people to get comfortable. And so for men, just trying to deshamify and just make it very normal. Yes, people do touch themselves, and it's okay to touch yourself, and it's okay to touch yourself while you're thinking about a woman or about somebody that you care about. But yeah, they can also have a hard time with that idea of flipping the switch, like, oh, now it's okay, now I can enjoy this. If they have worked so hard to be disconnected from their body and from pleasure, that can really be challenging. It can take a while for them to get comfortable.
Okay, let's see. We have there is no shortage of questions, as I detected would be the case, but I think we've got time for a couple of more. Um, okay, so this one is, what are your thoughts on purity balls and purity rings? Now, I think I know what your opinion on these is gonna be, but for anybody that isn't really familiar, can you tell us a little bit about that and uh, what your opinion is of those activities?
Sure. Well, when my oldest daughter started menstruating, I gave her a ring. Yes, I did. And her little sister was around and watching and listening to me say, "Oh, here, here's a ring for you," and because essentially you're old enough to make babies now, and so I want you to wait until you're with your husband and this sort of thing. And her little sister said, well, are you going to give me a ring when that happens to me? And I said, yes. And she said, can I have a turtle instead? Like, I don't, it's just hilarious, that one. But yes, so, oh, just it kind of, now it just seems like repeat and over the top. I think maybe uh, there are different ways to handle it, to certainly to tell a girl before, when her body's changing, what she can expect, and to celebrate her and celebrate, because we're missing out on rituals. And so I can see where the Christians rushed in here to try and make rituals to fill in some of that space. But we can come up with other ways that aren't like us trying to own our daughters' bodies, because that's what that whole purity culture thing is. And as far as purity balls, I just think that's hilarious, purity balls. But actually, what we're talking about are um, daddies, Christian dads, and they take their, I don't know, 12-year-old daughter or something like this, and they're going to have a dance together, and she's going to be wearing all white, and it's all these other girls wearing white, and they're going to be dancing with their fathers. It's really kind of weird because it does have almost a wedding-ish vibe to it, and it's very much about, your father owns you, and when you get married, he is going to give you to another man. So I find it quite disturbing. So no, I'm not a fan, and we can find other ways to celebrate the adolescence of our kids as they're growing up, and to try and empower them instead of disempower them.
I am going forward now with the recommendation that people just get a turtle instead. I love that.
The turtle.
As Daniel presents dragon.
Oh,
Get a bearded
very nice.
dragon.
I like it.
Amazing.
Oh, very nice. All right, got another one here for you. I think I'm going to present this one correct. I think I got this one. Do you have tips on how parents can and should respond in a healthy way if your child asks questions about sex that ends up sending you spiraling into your own personal flashbacks or traumas?
Mm, yes, and I have had times where I've felt my face go just totally red, because remember I said I told my kids they could ask me anything, and so when I told them that they could ask me anything, I said, I will answer you honestly, but it might take me a little while to figure out the best way. And of course, because there's a difference how you're going to answer an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old if they come to you with questions. So it's okay to say, I'm so glad you asked that question. So, give me a little while to think about it. And tomorrow I'll have an answer for you, or later today, or whatever it is. So you're acknowledging and you're celebrating the courage and the curiosity that the child or the young person is showing, and you're also being honest that you're not quite ready off the top of your head. You're not quite sure how to answer them in the best way that will make the most sense to them and help them the most with where they're at. So you're going to just take some time to figure that out. And then you phone me. I'll help you figure.
I love it. Okay, well, I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll go to the hangout. Well, let's see. Here's one. I think this is a really interesting question. What do you think is still needed to promote healthy narratives about sexuality in our communities and in our culture, and to be there to support those who may be antagonized for their identities? And this is a two-parter. How can we combat harmful and dehumanizing narratives that are being promoted?
So how can we support people, and how can we combat the harmful narratives? Right.
Yes.
So I think for businesses and counselors and therapists, um, we can make it obvious that we support the queer community,
Mhm.
like having our flags there or having pride signs or whatever it is. And we can also make sure we have a presence in our local pride events in the community so people know that we're there again. Um, and then, yeah, I think just well, I know one thing that I've done is been in touch with my local library about books, and with suggestions, and these books are helpful for kids. This person is a qualified sex educator, and they have a great book on being queer, and it's geared for kids, or 13-year-olds or whatever it is. So we can also be approaching our libraries, even our schools. I'm sorry, in the United States, I think you might have a tougher go of this, but even just letting your kids know that you are happy to talk with them about these things, and potentially buy as many copies as you can of books that are being banned, and have them at your house, or have them so that you can give them away, or you can leave them places, or your children know that they can give them out to their friends. That just the whole education piece, I think. And by the way, if you're a fan of Margaret Atwood, I did interview her on the Divorcing Religion podcast last year. So on my YouTube channel, you see my interview with Margaret Atwood, a fellow Canadian.
Going immediately to listen to that. All right, we have a bunch more questions, but I think we've only got time for one more, but then we'll go to the hangout after this and we can keep talking. So, stand by everyone. But Martin, you want to wrap us up with one final question?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a bunch of good questions that are still coming in on the chat. So yeah, definitely take those over to the hangout, please. So this one, not so much phrased as a question, but I think looking for some pointers. How do you navigate casual dating for someone who is curious about their body and sexuality, and giving a heads up to partners that you have never had sex but you want to explore? They want to be honest, but not a case study for people and their judgment when it comes up to sensitive issues about leaving the purity culture at age 27.
Hmm. Yes, wow. I feel like that is also a kind of an individual question. So n- not everybody is like worthy or safe to receive our information. So we do want to have our antennae up, so to speak, like just when we're having conversations with this person that we're just getting to know, we can drop a few breadcrumbs and kind of gauge their response. How did they respond to these things? Uh, and then at some point, you do have to be honest. If you want to have sex with someone, but it's your first time, I think um, it might be helpful for the other person to know that it's your first time. Maybe they're going to be extra slow or extra gentle. They because if they don't know that, they might think they're doing something wrong. Like we need to have open and plain communication. We also want to be aware of, is this a person that will be safe with our information. So I wish there was an easier way about it, but I think communication is really going to be the answer there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of your advice and tips on this. And like Martin said, there are a ton of more questions coming in. So we hope
Nice.
people will bring them to the hangout. Janice, are you going to be able to stick around with us for the hangout at
Sure.
all?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yep, I can be.
excellent.
I can stick around for a little while for sure.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, let's wrap up. Is there anything else that you want to share with us before we do wrap up and head over to the hangout?
Go to shamelesssexuality.org and get your. I'd love to see you online at the conference.
Excellent. Well, I cannot wait. So definitely recommend that. All right. Well, don't forget to go and see Janice at the Shameless Sexuality Conference, and don't
Mhm.
forget to come back here next week. Martin, what do we have going on next week?
Okay, so I am very excited about next week, which is why I jumped on our agenda really quickly to highlight this because I wanted to be able to say that Erica Matthews, who is Gutsick Gibbon, will be here next week. A brief evolutionary history of what we are and how we got here. Erica is awesome. She is such a good speaker and presenter, and she is totally epic and has amazing stuff on YouTube. You should give Erica everything she wants. Also, we have some upcoming guests: Bertha Vasquez, Nathan Lentz, Dr. Darrel Ray, and then Adrian Hill.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We have a lot of fun episodes coming up. Hope y'all will join us. And don't forget to follow us on the socials if that is something you are comfortable doing and it doesn't out you to your network in a way that you don't want to be. We also understand that that may be the case for people, so no obligation to do that. But if you do want to find us, we are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and of course, YouTube, where you can find previous episodes such as this one and a few others starring Janice Selbie. So definitely check those out too. And feel free to like and subscribe and follow and all of that. And it really does help other people find us and learn about our services. So that is a way that you can help others get connected. Okay. And what is one other way that people could get involved, Martin?
Well, there is volunteering, and I want to tell you about the benefits of volunteering. We have learned that healing can also come from helping others. RFR volunteers find meaning and purpose by volunteering with us. All of those services are supported by our staff and volunteers. We are always in need of volunteers, and there are all sorts of jobs besides working the helplines. Finding, vetting, and posting good resources for our clients to use, hosting support groups, supporting the OC, IT support, and even what we're doing right here and right now. You can apply to be a volunteer by filling out the form that's on our main page, and the link is now in the chat. If you go to recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer, you can find out more, and I hope that you find the time to do it.
Absolutely. We like doing it, and we would love to get to see you doing it with us. So, if that is something you are interested in, please check us out. And we also have a short 3-minute video on our main page that summarizes what we do. It's called RFR, What We Do. We try and make things easy for people. And that is another way that you can share with other people what it is that we have that might help support them. So, feel free to share that widely as well. And with that, I think we should stop talking and have a few closing thoughts from the fabulous Glinda Jordan, who I hear is also going to be speaking with us at the Shameless Sexuality Conference. Glinda, what do you have for us?
Yes, I am so excited to speak at Shameless Sexuality. I am so honored to have the opportunity to speak more about my journey through sexuality and non-monogamy and polyamory and purity culture. And I will bring, as my badge of honor, my own abstinence purity pledge card that I signed back in 2004. And I will never burn this. This is hilarious to me. It's a very constant, ongoing joke. Janice, thank you so much for donating your time to us today and speaking to us about this issue. Our volunteer squad just came back from American Atheists, and we gave presentations to donors on what we do. And of the top 3 issues that our clients come to us with, it's fractured relationships, lingering fear of hell, and what is the third one? Issues with sexuality. This is one of the biggest, we can never speak enough about this. And everything that you had to say, I could see the comments and the chat was just on fire with people sharing their experiences. And there is still so much guilt and shame and anxiety and fear. And every time that we can come together and create a platform for us to just speak about these issues with kindness and grace and compassion, I think it can help improve the lives of everyone so much who's endured religious trauma when it comes to really fucked up ideas about sex. So thank you again so much for coming by. There is one more thing I wanted to tell everyone. We are mere weeks away from our annual fundraiser. That is on May 10th. It is going to be hosted on The Line. We will be linking that YouTube for everyone. Please come out and support us. It's going to be very fun. I'm going to be in Florida at the time, but I promise I will be there. And then yes, please check out the website for Shameless Sexuality. I'm so excited to be able to present. I may make a virtual background where it looks like I'm on stage, and I'm heartbroken that I will not be able to meet you in person, Janice, but I do not blame you at all. And I want you to stay safe, and I want everyone to stay safe. And it's a little scary out there. So with that, again, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us about this issue. I wanted to chime in constantly about everything because we all have so much to say. And Kara and I feel very, very privileged, and everyone should be jealous because we just got to spend 4 days of hanging out with each other and drinking wine and ranting about this issue specifically. And there were some great fun times had at a club on Saturday night that maybe in the hangout we can bring up. But thank you again so much for talking about this with